Most welcome, Ahlan wa sahlan, in the Weltempfang of the Frankfurt Book Fair to our talk about flight, expulsion and migration in children's books. I'm Stephan Milich, and I'm looking forward to talking to Ibtisam Barakat, a prize-awarded Palestinian author living in the United States, and Kirsten Boie, a famous children's books author from Hamburg, to talk about this important subject matter. This year, UNHCR announced a sad piece of news. 80 million people in the world are on flight or in expulsion in their own country or in other countries, not being at home, the involuntary life in a foreign country, sometimes without nationality affiliation, characterizes their life in different continents. That's what we want to talk about today, and what this means in children's book literature and what authors think and write about. First, let me introduce the few authors. Ibtisam Barakat was born in Beltanuna, next to Jerusalem, and she grew up in Ramallah. She studied at the Biselt University, and then in 1986 she went to New York, and there she worked for the magazine The Nation, where she did a practical course. Then she studied into master study courses, and she worked as a journalist. Alongside with children's books, she writes poets, Write Your Life workshops. She's organizing light story workshops. She works in family matters, and two highly renowned autobiographies about her childhood and youth in the occupied Palestine appeared in English. The first autobiography with the title Tasting the Sky, or in Arabic, Asama, published in 2007. Then in 2016, Balcony on the Moon was her fourth Arabic children's book with the title Al-Fatah Al-Lakila, the Lilac Girl, 1919, published by Fatam in Palestine. She was awarded the renowned Sheikh Zayed Prize for children's books. Congratulations for that. Kirsten Boie need not be introduced to German readers and listeners. That's how numerous her works are, for smaller and bigger kids and for young adults. I have two kids myself, and I read wieder ich habe klar, dass Mama Anna Liebe hat. And bestimmt wird alles gut. I have been reading to them. The last mentioned book, Bestimmt wird alles gut, in Arabic, Ratman al-Raftan, has become school literature in schools, and at Klet it was published as a board book and then as an edition for the Federal Center for Political Education. It's about the story of Rafat and Hassan escaping from Homs in Syria because the war against the civil society becomes worse and worse. They flee through Egypt on a small ship to Italy, and from there to Germany. Finally, the story tells about how the children reach in Germany, starting a new life. Later, we'll talk about more details of the book, but for a start, let me ask the two of you, maybe Ibtisam, how come that you write literature for children? What is the essential reason from your point of view? Are there several reasons who make these telling stories for kids so important?
First, thank you so much for inviting me, and I am honored to be with Kirsten and also with Stephan, and to be at the Frankfurt Book Fair. Even though it's virtual, I wish it were in person and real to meet people, but this way is also good. The reason I write for children, I also write for grown-ups. I don't only write for children, but because I love childhood. It's a world that unites all of human beings. All living human beings have been citizens in the world of childhood. So anyone who is either a child or a grown-up knows what it is to be a child. So it's a uniting entrance, and also it's a world that has freedom that's much more than the freedom the adults have. There's freedom of imagination. There's a freedom of loving the world, exploring the natural phenomena, developing language. Children invent language. It's relating to not just human beings, but to animals, to all the phenomena. So if there is any freedom in the life of a human being, it is truly in childhood. And for some reason, the society decides to curb that freedom. And so as we grow up, we become less and less imaginative, less and less free, less and less of ourselves. And in writing for young readers, I like to advocate the idea that please protect this freedom for the young people and for the adults, because if a young person does not give up these freedoms to imagine and to solve problems in very creative ways and to be themselves fully, and also something very important, a child knows that they are changing constantly, and that's the way of life. A child knows that they just learned to walk by making 1,000 mistakes in walking. A child knows that they just learned this new word and they're so excited about it, and language is infinite. So to protect that perspective for a child, that you will be changing all your life and it's very exciting. You'll be making mistakes all of your life and it's very exciting. So for me, as an adult who loves childhood and feels kinship with all of life, when I write for young people, I want to protect that freedom for them and that perspective of it's okay to make mistakes and to change and change and change and adjust until we repair them. It's how humanity is. So, and also I keep myself oriented in the world and remembering what it is to be a human being by remaining loyal to the values of childhood and an ally, a strong ally to young people, especially that young people are a silenced group. This is a group that cannot advocate for itself at all because of intellectual abilities, as well as language abilities, developmental abilities. And we don't allow this group to express honestly its needs and views of the grown-up world. So this group, children, needs strong allies among adults. And I feel very, very honored by my desire to be an ally to young people. The young person in me and the young person who is young, as well as the young people in the adults, because I believe there are prisoners, children who are prisoners inside all of the adults.
Thank you, Kirsten Boie. What about you? What did make you writing children's literature? And what does childhood mean to you?
Well, first of all, let me say a few words. It's great that we organized this meeting across continents even, that we can talk to each other just as if we were sitting in one room. I can agree to a lot of things that Ibtisam has just said. A lot. Not everything. Maybe we have to be careful, not idealizing childhood too much. Childhood is not always as idyllic and harmonious as we think it to be, not even in the countries where people in principal terms and children in principal terms are doing well. But there are also children that suffer from a horrible childhood. And this is what our books talk about partly. The reason why I write for children, and I don't write for adults, not only for children, and some books of mine were later on published in adults publishing houses. But the reason why I write for children is, and that coincides with what Ibtisam said, children are so open. For them, everything is new. That means if I tell something to children, I can always have the hope that this really arrives in their minds and that this might change things. We as adults, we know books don't change things easily. A lot has to happen indeed. That I'm so impressed by my book that it changes my attitude, my opinion, my way of life. We are incredibly settled in what we think and what we are convinced about. And this, again, is part already what Ibtisam meant. But when we write for children, we can really get deep impressions and get them across. We all know that. I think every one of us can mention one book from childhood that was so important for them. It's different books with different people, because this always has to do with the fact and the effect of the life of this child and at what time this book reaches the child. But we all had that in childhood, and this is really so great. When you write for children, you can always have the feeling, yeah, it's relevant what you do. Even if it's only entertainment, maybe, but it's an entertainment that can go very deeply.
In my case, I return to children's books time and again, keep reading them, and then I feel tremendous strength and hope, because adults' literature is sometimes so heavy and not so optimistic and full of hopes as in children's books. And children's books are also very clear, mostly in their statements, which even helps me as an adult. Therefore, I love reading children's literature. So let me ask you, what about children's books literature? How far can children's book literature be realistic and close to life, meaning that difficult, burdensome events and situations are being narrated? Or are there also limits where you want to protect children not to experience too depressing or pessimistic things? Maybe Kirsten first and then Ibtisam, please.
Well, I believe, first of all, there is no subject that you cannot tell children about, at least if they are affected somehow by it. The decisive point is how you do it. It's always that you find a possibility to narrate it in such a way that children with their life experience so far can understand, can accept it, and I have to tell it, narrate it in such a way that it's not too heavy, not too burdening, so that maybe then they close up. I mean, children can easily do that. If they read a book and it becomes too sad or dull, then they just put it to the side. If it's read to them, then they just close up in their internal self, in their inner self. But you don't want that. And therefore, you have to narrate very carefully, and you have to give children the chance to digest it. And one important point is, and you mentioned it before, I believe books for children, different from youth, adolescents, there is a sharp cut. Children's books should always, at the end, offer hope. They need not have a happy ending, not in the real sense of it. It need not be rosy, but it has to offer hope, even with an open ending, because then children can think it on in a positive way. What's the purpose of telling children life is so horrible and everything is devastating and you cannot change it? What do we expect what children do? Whilst we tell it to them in a way that they can believe that it can be changed to the better, then maybe they develop the wish to do something for this. And finally, also the question, how do you narrate something that is horrible and cruelsome in a way that you don't make them stop reading it? Ibtisam mentioned language. I think the question how you express things plays an important role in this book that we are talking about today. Bestimmt wird alles gut. Definitely everything will be good. It starts talking about the bomb attack on Homs. And at the end, some houses were in rubbles. Some people didn't stand up any longer. Doesn't say people died. They couldn't stand up, you know. So if children need that, it leaves them this little room open, and with instruments like that you can do it, and then every subject can be narrated to children.
Ibtisam, you also write about very difficult subject matters, children who lose their home country. You grew up in occupation, you experienced violence in your early childhood, expulsion. It's very difficult in West Jordan to grow up as a child and to be confronted with that on a daily note, with the fact that houses are destroyed, that there are checkpoints. Hence, what Kirsten just mentioned from her perspective. How do you view it from your viewpoint as a Palestinian-American author?
Thank you, Kirsten, for your ideas. I appreciated hearing what you have to say, and I agree as well with the importance of teaching children hope and how to manufacture hope, how to take something that appears without hope and to turn it around into a hopeful reality. This is a skill that children need and grown-ups also need. But if we start this skill with children, they will grow it throughout life. I would like to first respond to an element of the past question, then I will speak about addressing difficult topics, because I do that, and obviously Kirsten does that, and many authors who are making a difference are doing that because these are necessary and pressing issues. But I want to go back to the point about children's literature being hopeful, being beautiful, being imaginative, while the literature for adults or produced by adults is heavy, difficult, depressing, sad endings, etc. For me, this is a very essential point that needs to be studied because it reflects what happened, the transition that happened between a human being a child, very hopeful, very imaginative, very creative. What happened to that child to become the author who's writing these terrible stories about a society that does not reflect what the child was? Because the adult is only 20 or 30 or 40 years past having been a child. So something happens in the process where this child who was wonderfully imaginative and hopeful and open becomes closed and becomes depressed and becomes unhopeful. This needs to be addressed, this territory in the middle where we make our children lose hope, where we make our children see the world as a place of hopelessness. Now, as we work on children's literature, I hope and believe that we are trying to prevent a world of adults who are hopeless and who are fighting and who are destructive to one another from occurring again. Because if we change the reality of the child and the mind of the child to something more positive, more creative, more problem-solving oriented, loving of humanity, of nature, of the universe, feeling at home in this place, we will prevent all these horrific genocides and horrific wars and horrific competitions that are killing whole peoples throughout the 20th century, throughout humanity. So this writing for children and educating the child is not entertainment. It isn't. It's like planting a crop in the middle, in the mind of a child, and that will be harvested later on, whatever we plant in the mind and the heart of a child. So one of the sad things is that throughout the world, I see the adult authors, for instance, when they get awards, they get an award that's 3 times more than the awards that children's writers get. Or the appreciation in the society is always given to the writers who are adults, not the for adults, not the writers for young readers, when the real producing of a brilliant reader or writer actually happens in childhood. The child who read a beautiful book and loved reading will become the writer later on, Ernest Hemingway or Kirsten, or Mahmoud Darwish, or that was a child who read a good book and loved language and loved expression. And so the investment happens early. And I want great appreciation for children's writers to reflect the immensity of the job that we are doing. One thing the Sheikh Zayed Book Award does, which is really amazing, is that it gives the same amount of the award to the children of writers as any other writer. There are like 7 categories, and the children's writers are honored the same way. That is true leadership in an intellectual way. Now, I'd like to move to addressing difficult topics like war, colonialism, and the destructive nature of the interactions between adults in the world. Now, the children are watching that. The children see that, live that, are destroyed by that. They don't need us to write a book about it. They live it. They see it in the news, and they see it in the conversation between the adults in the families. They see it in the attitudes of all the adults, and they have questions about it. It's either we address those questions honestly. They already know the stories and already have the questions, but they don't have an honest response from us, the grown-ups, who have been taught to be dishonest with ourselves and with the children. So we can have the choice of being honest in having a conversation, opening up the most difficult topics that fill the minds of our children, and we try to silence them. We like say, don't speak, because if you speak, you'll speak about the issues I don't want to speak about. So all we need to do is be honest to what is already happening and talk about it exactly as Kirsten said, in hopeful ways. And in order for us to do that, we must become hopeful ourselves. Otherwise, our children will see it as a lie, that we're giving them stories that are fiction, but the reality, they have to live without these hopes. So the job of children's literature and the job of the adult who cares about children, whether we write books or not, is to grow that hope in ourselves, because our children learn from us rather than from books. We write the books as ways of communicating, just additional way of communicating. And the century before, there were no books, not for adults or children. It was story that communicated, oral. It was what the child saw in life that communicated without even language. So our responsibility for young people is the same responsibility for the grown-ups, is to care about the human being at various stages. And please remember that a person who's 90 years old becomes like a child. They need a story, they need kindness, they need a cognitive conversation that's at their level. Perhaps it's decreasing language, people begin to forget language, words, etc. We need to care that way too. It's a long journey, a life journey that begins with childhood, ends with childhood perhaps, and requires that loving attitude that we offer to children. I think it needs to be offered to all of us, especially to ourselves and to anyone we come in contact with, in writing or in any other way.
Thank you very much. That takes me to your book, Das lilafarbene Mädchen, The Girl in Pink, and how the story ends. It's the story of a girl which likes painting and decides to visit the old house located in Jaffa, which the family loses when they were expelled. And they go to Jaffa. She goes to Jaffa, to the door of her old house. She recognizes it immediately, the windows, the wall, the door, and so forth. And the girl which now lives in the house opens the door, but sees the other girl outside and closes the door again. And there's no encounter, no meeting between the girl who lost her house and the girl who now lives in the house. And then it goes on. The girl is sad, takes a stone out of the house, not the foundation stone, but the stone of pain, not of Hashal Assad, but Hashal Asa. She takes the stone, puts it aside to her, and she begins painting the house. She starts crying in different colors. The tears have different colors. And the girl withdraws with the house, which she painted, and she takes along all the colors she used. The colors disappear for one night. From Jaffa, everything is lilac, pink, and dark, just one shade of color. So that is kind of an open end. It's not a happy end, of course, and there is no encounter. So could you also imagine a story in which the two girls would really meet because they are drawn similarly, look different, similarly in the story? So is there a possibility of writing a story of a real encounter of the two? What would it look like?
Thank you so much for the question. This is a very important question. It's symbolic. I think the Palestinian has to meet themselves first, and they have to meet their loss. In the story where the painter, Tamam al-Akhal, actually, she's like a famous Palestinian painter who tried to go to her home in Jaffa, and she was not allowed. This is a real story. And I took this story and turned it into something hopeful for the child who a Palestinian child or any other child who tries to go home and cannot enter home, is not allowed to go home. Sometimes we try to go home to the heart of a parent and they don't allow us in, or to something we love and we're not allowed. There are so many restrictions on us. And so I wanted to have the Palestinian child, for the first time really, encounter the Nakba, which is the catastrophe. After Israel was started, Palestine was ruined. The Palestinians experienced a Nakba because we lost our homes, we lost our nationhood, we lost so much. And we got stuck on that as a people, and our children as well. The pain is filling us. And we're stuck there. We think about it and then we're devastated again every time we think about it. And I wanted to offer the Palestinian child and the grown-up as well an experience of encountering the Nakba and not being stuck, not being stopped anymore, but transforming that energy of sorrow and pain and devastation into something beautiful, into art, empowering that child who's constantly hearing about our devastated past, that, okay, there's devastation, like an earthquake or some devastation happened, but we shouldn't stay there. And so this girl who's encountering the Nakba for the first time in Arabic or Palestinian literature in 72 years, a book talks about the Nakba. This is the first book. Or in world literature, because world literature doesn't talk about it. So this is the first time it's being talked about, and I wanted to have the child go face the Nakba, see that she has what it takes to transcend it, to move through it. And so she's a painter, she loves to paint. when she begins to cry, the paint comes out with her tears. So her tools for self-expression are with her already. She doesn't have to buy paint. She doesn't need anything other than her willingness to heal herself, her willingness to express herself. So she begins to paint, and she's no longer stuck. She's moving. The water moves us and cleanses us. And she experiences loving the house because the house recognizes her, loves her. The colors of the house move to come with her because she's not allowed in. The house itself wants to go with her, to meet her. But the stone cannot move. The colors in nature can move. So I introduced the child to the theory of colors. That colors have vibrations. They constantly change and interact. They change our mood. They change our mindset as we change them. So I wanted to teach the young Palestinian that they have a great tool in nature, even if they don't have paint, in how the sky changes all the time. The colors change all the time. And I'm gonna stop by saying that in Arabic culture, when you ask somebody, how are you? Like, hello, how are you? You ask them in many countries, shlonak, what is your color right now?
Thank you. So this book, The Lilac Girl, did you mainly have Palestinian children in mind as readers, as audience, or what was your mind on when you wrote the book?
The reader was in mind was me. I have a child inside of me who lived in 1967, a war, and my life became very devastated, and my childhood became ruined. And I wrote about that in Tasting the Sky, A Palestinian Childhood, and then A Balcony on the Moon, Coming of Age in Palestine. These are my memoirs in English, and they got translated, Tasting the Sky, to many languages, but not German, not yet. So in my mind, I had the child me going home and facing this loss, and I wanted to find a solution. And because I'm just one of the people, I'm not unique, I knew what solves a problem for me will solve a problem to millions of other people. And so I took this story because I see literature as a medicine, as a healing path. When I start writing a book, the person who starts to write a book is not the person who finishes a book. It's a person who's more healed, more complete, more expressed, having understood myself more. Also, a person who starts reading a book, a child or an adult who starts reading a book, is not the same person who finished reading the book. This is a person who had taken a journey, had felt all kinds of feelings, met all kinds of characters. So my people in Palestine are in captivity. They're in a prison, literally. Even the Palestinians who live outside of Palestine, like me, we also live in a prison on the inside because our people are suffering. I cannot feel completely happy while all my family members are suffering. So I wanted to add to the medicine, to the healing of the wound through literature and creativity. And it happened because many people read this Al-Fatah Laylakiya, and they told me this is truly astonishing because it transcended, it opened the door in the Nakba, in the Naksa, in the pain. And you could tell when you take a medicine and it heals you, you stop coughing, you're happier, you can smile, your throat is not sore, it works. And this story, when you read it, for a Palestinian, for a non-Palestinian, it works. And I feel grateful that my muses helped me in adding healing to the world. One a friend from Japan told me that when she read The Lilac Girl, that the children who lived through tsunami would love to read this book because they lost their homes. And then they can go, and instead of experiencing that tsunami again, they can experience victory over that tsunami. They can see the tsunami and not be stuck there, but move through it and accept that life is full of destruction. But also the answer is we take the destroyed pieces and make artwork. We make new meaning. And this is how not just human life works, this is how the trees work. This is how the fall season is. The trees get destroyed by the wind. We have a new way of putting themselves together, and life goes on. What I would like to teach myself and the child every single day, and everyone in the world, is we expect things to fall apart, like the famous book, Things Fall Apart. We expect them to fall apart because they do and they need to. But we can also expect these parts that fell to come up in more beautiful ways, in more wise ways. And that way we are empowered. And we are called on to become more creative by the destruction, rather than to be destroyed also ourselves.
Thank you very much. I hope really that the book will be translated into German like your two autobiographies and your novel. Let me return to the image of the house, because Germany can also be considered a house in the year 2015, which was open for some months, and many people could enter Germany to find a new home. And in recent years, the house, even Europe, has closed more and more. So let me come to the wonderful book of Kirsten, Bestimmt wird alles besser. How did this book develop? How come that you wrote this book? At the beginning it says, this is the true story of Racha and Hassan. Well, what was the process of writing like? Maybe you can tell us more about it.
Yeah, I maybe show you the book first. Here you can see that you have it in German and Arabic.
Yes, the Arabic title, Hat man al-Rad aftan.
Yes. So to speak, it's in two languages, bilingual. Beginning of 2015, I started it before summer 2015, when people in big numbers came to Germany. But particularly people from Syria had been coming to Germany already in 2012, and we could see that it wouldn't stop. And in our city, we had several families, and I had contact with them from Syria. And at that time, I heard so many stories, sad stories. And of course, I also knew that these children would meet German children in schools or kindergartens. So German children would get to know refugee children, and I thought it's important to tell them their story in order to create understanding for them. And after the summer of 2015, it became even more important, also for children that didn't get to know refugee children. By the way, in order to develop an understanding for flight and reasons of flight. And it's different from Ibtisam. I'm in the lucky situation that I didn't have to experience all these cruelties. And it's always dangerous to write on those things just by hearsay and stories that are told to me, and then it becomes kitschy very easily. So I visited a family in our city that was there for more than a year, and I talked to the big older children. They spoke German quite well, not perfect, but very well. And I was very much afraid that I would open up old wounds in that talk with them, but it proved to be the opposite. On the contrary, the children were absolutely happy, finally, eventually telling everything to a person. Before, no one asked them. Their classmates didn't ask them, teachers didn't ask them, because they were all afraid to ask that question. And for me, it was important to impart it to German children, these children that you regard so different. They look different, they don't speak German language properly, and many have been traumatized and behave in different ways and are maybe not that nice as you would wish them to be. These children used to have the same life that you'd had, and they were just torn out of it. And I wanted to show German children to identify better with the children that were refugees. And I started, how was it when you were in Homs? I know to be a child in Germany, but how was it in Homs? And then they started to tell and talk and talk and talk, and it just developed on its own. So I needn't do anything. The children continued to talk and talk and talk. I not even had to ask additional questions. Sometimes the mother intervened. I don't know what she said. I mean, she understood it a bit, and she knew just a little bit of German. And then she asked for auditions, and this was how these children told me their entire story. It was so grand and great because they told me the story from the perspective of the child, what was important for the child. And definitely that's relevant for our children. I mean, Ibtisam said already, childhood is the same everywhere, even if they have different conditions of life. But what touches them, that's very similar. And by the way, the girl that is called Rahab lost the doll during the flight. And that was the most painful experience she talked about. She mentioned that. And the same I see with reactions of children. I mean, this book has been available for 5 years now. This is always a question they write to me. Did she get a new doll? Is it just as beautiful? Does she love the doll in the same way as she loved Lula? And this possibility to really narrate what was important for the children was so grand. That was a gift. But I didn't want the family to be now accessed by the public. So we agreed that the names were to be changed. The children could select names for them, how they wanted to be named in the book. That's their idea, not my idea, these names. And the profession of the father was changed. He's not really a doctor, but at that time I thought it was important to say you have highly qualified and skilled and educated people who come here, because many people thought there would always these unemployed people who come here without any qualification. Well, this father actually has a qualified profession as well. So this is how I could alienate it a bit.
Ibtisam, you're still around, but Kirsten has been interrupted, unfortunately. Let's wait for her to return.
Now I'm back. Okay, super. We can just
Well, the last
continue.
sentence was, it was most fortunate that, and then it disappeared.
Yeah, it was most fortunate that then the book came when many people came to Germany, and many children also came to Germany. And we then decided, the publisher and I, that this book should be available in Arabic as well, definitely, so that we can reach these children and their parents, that they know what is being narrated there and that they don't have a bad feeling. We even have a German-Arabic glossary at the end. And I heard from many parents that their children would also use Arabic words over dinner. Because children love foreign languages. I got some feedback from teachers who read it to their classes. And some said, we have got the Syrian boy in the class. He never ever told us his story. And now I read out the story, the book, and all of a sudden he started to tell his story. And the other children were all very much impressed. It really changed the situation in our class. And I got a lot of reactions that refugee children also liked this book a lot. And till today, I get a lot of mail, particularly from school classes, where they read the book or have the book read to them. They ask questions to me like, how is this family doing today? How are the children? And I think this is for me really a gift to see that obviously this story, which is not my own one. I was given this story as a gift as well, that this really can change the lives of children.
Thank you. There's one moment in the story where I overwhelmed time and again when I reread it, namely the point at which where the conductor says good luck to you instead of stopping the child, penalizing it because the child moves around without a ticket in the train to Germany. And those are moments which you need to cultivate, so to say. And we need many more of them, and we need to become like that conductor.
What's great about it, that this is precisely true. That obviously was a point where the mother intervened and the children didn't regard that so important. But then the children told me that story. Also the bad woman before that mocked at them, and then the conductor came. And that shows that we cannot or shall not be that pessimistic with respect to the behavior of people. I think there are many more people around, also adults, that really are very much willing to help others, to support them, to suffer with them, to be grateful that they are so well, even if others are not so well. And this is really what I base myself on. But like Ibtisam said, we can try with our books to help already in childhood that they can become adults like this.
Ibtisam, what about you and your book? Did you also go to Palestinian school classes or US school classes? Was it read at school? Did you go on reading tours? Did you make such experience with your book, The Lilac Girl?
Yes. My books, the two memoirs are about my childhood, and I went to UN schools, like United Nations schools for refugees. My first 9 grades were in Palestine in refugee schools. And these are schools that the United Nations started for Palestine after Palestine was destroyed. And the only way we could go to schools is if the UN started elementary and secondary schools for us. So I got educated there, very, very basic. And I wrote about that in Tasting the Sky, which is an experience on its own, because the UN gave us milk in the morning. They gave us cod liver oil. They vaccinated us. Also, they put like terrible things in our hair because we didn't have water to wash. It's like a really terrible experience to be in war and to have nothing to live on, not water, no electricity, not enough sustenance for life. That on its own creates a human being that is different from a human being who is created by having their needs met. And both human beings grow up using language, trying to communicate, but language externally appears the same. However, language has values that are rooted in the experiences, not in the sounds, not in the music of the language. It's rooted in the meaning, in the experiences. So with Tasting the Sky and Balcony and the Moon and the other books, as well as The Lilac Girl, I went to the refugee schools and went to where I was also a child, a 6-year-old, in order to tell the children that you can move from being a refugee to being an author in the world, a global author. And I was there, I was in your place. It's just so important for them to see somebody who speaks their language, looks like them, speaks like them, sat in the same chairs, was hungry like them, felt despair like them, and then could find different ways and not just on my own, but life, as Kirsten said, there are many helpful adults in the world and they've helped me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And that's why I want to be a helpful adult too. That's the only way for humanity to move forward, because children cannot make it on their own, and groups that are crushed cannot make it on their own, and they were not crushed by themselves. Other humans crushed them for the most part. So for humanity to have hope in itself, we must help one another. It's not luxury, and it's not a goodness of our heart. It's essential for our survival. It isn't I'm good and I'm helpful. It's if I have any speck of intelligence in me, I need to help life. It's my home, okay? The planet Earth is my home. If I help another human being, I am not doing a favor to anyone. This is my home, and I want it to be a safe home rather than people fighting each other and destroying one another's lives. So yes, I go to, and I've gone to many schools in Palestine, in of course in America before COVID, and with the Lilac Girl, what the children found most appealing is the fact that the girl could cry colorful tears. They loved the magic of something extraordinary, that she didn't have to buy colors. They don't have money to buy colors, but that she could actually produce colors by her feelings. And I told them, yes, you can recolor the world just by changing your feeling about it. You can think a different thought. You can think of a flower like a sunflower and take that yellow. And if you look at something you don't like, you can take the yellow of that sunflower and paint that thing in your imagination, and you will feel different. You will feel the power of you being able to change an image in your mind. And since all conflicts are images in our minds, unresolved images, we can truly resolve those images in our minds, and then we can resolve them in reality. Any genius in the world has done that. Any scientist, any artist, anyone who's done that, they first did it in their imagination. And so to teach the young person that you can have a Nakba, a catastrophe, on the national level, like the Palestinians, we have that, or a catastrophe on the personal level, or an emotional catastrophe, and there's a lot that you can do about it. This is an opportunity for you to see what you can do and how you can transform it to something beautiful that nurtures your life. That is the key. If you're imprisoned in the thought that you cannot do anything about this problem, and then to give them the key that you're stuck because no one told you that you have abilities beyond what you know or the adults know. So search in yourself, search in your abilities. And color, as related to our sight, is so central to vision. And in our language, we ascribe colors to educate ourselves about if something is healthy, is not healthy, is it hopeful, is not hopeful. Language is full of color, and to tell the child that the word which you own and it's free, you don't have to buy that word, is yours, and you can tell yourself a story, a new story about something. Even if I'm not there to write a story for you or tell you a story, you're the #1 storyteller of your life, and the stories that you tell your life are the ones that will change your life. I am just offering you an example of how a story transforms the thinking and the abilities and the imagination and the relationships in the society. But ultimately, it's the stories you tell yourself, whether you tell them to others or not. Those are the gold mines. And so I wanted the children, the refugee children in Palestine and any, wherever they are, to transform the experience of refugeehood, which is an experience of loss, to an experience of richness. Because all of us human beings are refugees, whether we left heaven, from the sky, if you believe in those stories, but we left our home in heaven and came to earth, or left Palestine, came to America, or left Europe, went to Africa, or because of whatever. The experience of being a refugee is the standard experience on life, and having a home and not leaving it is the exception on earth. If you read history, you will know that we have, all of us, been driven away because of wars, because of famines, because of diseases, because of injustices, etc. So the experience, we need to tell our children that the experience of being a refugee and losing home or losing something is standard in life. As we grow older, we're not only gaining, we are losing. This is truly the honest truth about life. It's an experience of loss that can be balanced out by the experience of creative imagination, that to each loss, it will create a counterbalance of a meaning or a depth or a new experience. So it's balanced rather than loss.
Aber
so our lives are balanced rather than lost. And a child needs to know that, the honest truth about growing up. And the entire point of writing for children is to help them grow up in a way that's better than ours. So they will do the same with the future generations.
Well, this honesty in children's books, communicating about it is not so easy. Just like Kirsten said before, in Der Haf oder das Mädchen, just doesn't tell her story like this, but that there needed to be a reason for it, and this has become very clear now. Namely, that children's literature uses and creates such reasons for narration. And it's wonderful that schools make this experience with children's literature, working with it at school, and which creates moments and talks and conversations which otherwise would not have been created. And this is a clear plea for the strengthening of children's literature everywhere in the world. In Germany, we have already achieved a lot with reading, promotion and festivals, which you also have in the Arab world, in Jordan and Palestine, the Tamil Institute, where the Lilac Girl was published, which is also highly interactive in terms of reading promotion. They do a great job, and these books need to be translated into German and other languages. And, well, adults also need to read these books. And sometimes it's so simple because the truth is lost in children's books. I mean, it resides in children's books and you can find it there, but you need to find it. Even adults need to read more children's literature. Unfortunately, we have already reached the end of our talk, which I would love to continue, but at the end, let me just ask you whether there is something which is still on your mind, something you have not yet mentioned, which you deem important in your literature for you as authors, something you just want to contribute at the end. Maybe Kirsten first.
I think we could really say a lot on that subject at the beginning when we asked why we write for children. I believe we need to become aware that literature can do something that no other media can do, as a matter of fact. The reader dives so deeply into the world of feeling of a person, and this is something that no other media can do. Not with theories or not with films. I mean, there are these images. I don't have images when I read a book. I can develop my own images in my own head, looking for memories and feelings and emotions that I had before in such a way. A very particular, very close relation is developed when telling stories, when reading, because there are no images. And precisely for that reason, the effect can be so strong. And therefore, I'm so happy that I am allowed to write children's books. This is really a great gift.
First, I would like to say that I am so grateful and thankful for meeting Kirsten and Stephan and the audience at the Frankfurt Book Fair. I am honored and very joyful that we had this conversation together. The other thing is I'd like to just show you the some of the books. This is this is Al-Fata Al-Laylakiya. This is the Lilac Girl, the book that won the Sheikh Zayed Book Award. And this is Tasting the Sky, A Palestinian Childhood. And this is just so you can see the books, Balcony and the Moon,
Ja, man kann es gut sehen.
Coming of Age in Palestine, and The Jar That Became a Galaxy, الجرة التي صارت مجرة. And this is أتال مربوطة تطير. This is about a letter in the Arabic language that refuses to do what it's supposed to do in the Arabic language. And it changes the entire alphabet. And this is the last book, Hadiya al-Hamza. It's a letter to one of the, it's a present to the letter Hamza in the Arabic language. But the majority of Arabs think that Arabic is 28 letters, and they drop the 29th letters for some reason. And so this letter refuses to be discounted any longer and demands to be integrated. So I want to thank you so much for allowing me to be with you and to bring in a Palestinian voice. One thing I must say is the world is so unsafe for the Palestinians, so unsafe for a Palestinian voice. And if something can be done to help in the healing of the Palestine situation, I would, with all my heart, request that you help in doing that, because there are children living in Gaza or Ramallah or in camps, refugee camps, for generations now, and they haven't seen the world, and they don't have books, they don't have what it takes to sustain their hearts and their minds. And they are worthy of the love of the world as much as any child in the world. And I want to stop here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I've been happy to talk with you at great lengths. I wish you all the best and look forward to coming to know the next book, the next conversation. All the best to you.
Alles Gute.